All right, good morning, and we're live for this morning's discussion of Seinfeld, the Bizarro Jerry. So where's the group going to start this morning?
We're gonna start by talking about Elaine and how she attempted to replace her friends and maybe more high functioning versions of themselves, only to find out maybe she wasn't as high functioning as they were.
Right. So any parallel in psychiatry or psychology here? So and let me frame it this way too. Let's say a patient presents to you, her name is Elaine, with a chief complaint of depression. Okay. And after an initial psychiatric evaluation, you put together a biopsychosocial treatment plan that includes psychotherapy. And you're going to provide that psychotherapy. And in looking forward to your first session, you have the information contained in the Bizarro Jerry. So now let me re-ask the question. Any parallel, any meaning with regard to Elaine's interaction with her new cohort that might inform psychotherapy?
I mean, I think a lot of themes are pointing to opposites in the episode. So I would say opposites, maybe allowing her to have some self-reflection that would maybe come through therapy, and really kind of getting to know herself better too, because she saw that, as you mentioned, that she also contributed to some of the same traits that maybe she found initially a little like antagonizing in her friends, but now she's realizing that like she has those too. So that type of self-realization I think is a really important point.
I think going off that too, it seems like she thought the issues were outside of her control. She had an external locus of control when really there should have been internal locus of control, and she had poor insight to how she was contributing to cycles and her friendships.
I don't think there's any doubt that Elaine and all of the characters in this situational comedy have an external locus of control. Their self-worth is determined by others' opinions of them. They cannot walk into a room, have something said about them, and recognize and feel true feeling that they are still the same person, and that their self-value actually comes from within. That would be an internal locus of control, despite what people may think about you. Right? That's not the case here. It's not the case for her, not the case for Jerry, and it's not the case for George. I think Kramer's right on that borderline. What else is going on here? I heard the word opposites. I mean, clearly the Bizarro Jerry, the word bizarro focuses on the opposite nature of all of her new friends. If you're looking at psychotherapy, how does this opposite theme play out, or how may this opposite theme play out? What do we think of when we think of someone who works in terms of their thoughts and therefore their feelings in binary opposites?
Black and white.
Yeah, yeah. I just wonder if there's something there with regard to a cluster B personality, right? You know, and in further support of that, I also heard that our formulation of Elaine in this particular episode has a lot to do with not only self-reflection, but how her own thoughts and feelings are reflected back to her. So when she's surrounded by friends who reflect the same values, she believes that they are a problem and moves away from them, only to realize, again, reflected by her new friends, her Bizarro friends, that she also embodies a lot of those same qualities, right? Any parallel there with regard to reflecting back and actually drawing these types of conclusions?
About that projection a little bit, because it seems like these are qualities she has, but she's attributing it to her friends, right? So that might be
Could be, absolutely. And even if her friends do have the qualities that Elaine and we would all agree have, that doesn't mean that she's not projecting. So that's something to consider strongly. Yeah. Keeping within the same cluster though. So if Elaine is maladaptively and rigidly employing the defense mechanism of splitting, it probably will incur some risk with regard to her developing borderline personality disorder, right? On the other hand, keeping within that same cluster, like antisocial, narcissistic, as well as histrionic, reflecting back self-worth, what might it, another personality disorder that we might consider that would cluster with borderline? Narcissism, right? Narcissism. Right, right, exactly right. So you're not wrong, and I think we could really kind of tie this together with regard to the or discussing the derivation of this term, right? So who here has studied Greek mythology? You want to tell us the story of Echo and Narcissus?
Drowns himself trying to find his reflection in like a river.
Wow.
Basically, that's how it felt him because he's so enamored of himself.
Well, near death.
Yeah, he like nearly drowned in the river behind his find himself. Which also kind of shows he has poor insight about what he ends and others begin because he's like thought he was in love with himself.
Yeah, and then it really gets borne out in the actual pathology itself. So, I mean, the dialogue or the story actually starts with Echo, right? So Echo's got this wonderful gift that she could talk to anyone for any length of time, and is taken advantage of by the god of Olympus. I mean, the god Zeus, because as he's having these extramarital affairs, his wife has to be kept occupied. So he introduces Echo to Hera. Hera's talking to Echo nonstop, and Zeus is out doing what Zeus does best, right? Now Zeus gets caught, and who gets blamed? Who does Hera blame? Echo. Why? And I want to. Your answer has to be a psychological term, perhaps another defense mechanism. I don't think it's splitting. Displacement. I mean, her anger is towards her husband, but unfortunately, he is the top god of Olympus. So sorry. So displaced anger goes towards Echo. What happens? Does anybody remember what Hera does to Echo? She takes away her voice, right? She takes away her very gift, right? So now all this maiden can do is repeat the final word spoken to her, hence Echo, right? So now what happens next is arguably the earliest and perhaps even the best depiction of somebody dying from depression. And that she just withers away to nothing, so that the only thing we could hear now is her voice, right? And if you still go to a canyon or a forest, you can still hear Echo. She'll repeat the last word back to you. Now, the actual reason why she dies is because of unrequited love, because after her gift is actually taken away from her, she meets Narcissus, and she falls instantly in love with him at first sight. Unfortunately, the conversation doesn't go well. Right. She can't speak to Narcissus unless Narcissus speaks to her. And only then can she say the last word spoken. So Narcissus is less than interested, and he shuns her, and that's when she dies. Now, the other gods of Olympus actually see this and take revenge for Echo, and they they provide the same curse, bestow the same curse on Narcissus. You too will fall in love with the very first person you meet, and it will be also unrequited. And as soon as that happens, he sees his reflection in a river, and he can't pull himself away, right? That's Narcissus. Now, before he dies, the gods of Olympus take pity on him and turn him into the Narcissus, turn him into a daisy, which still grows on the muddy beds of rivers, right? But that is a derivation of the term. The individual who understands that their self-worth is only which is reflected back. Unless you tell them that they are good, they really don't believe it. That's the narcissist, right? So that's what we have to provide in psychotherapy, is this idea that your self-worth actually comes from within, right? And that requires going back and relearning that self-worth at an age where that should have been bestowed or internalized, which is what? It might start as early as 2, right? If you believe Freud. Right? But that's Narcissus, and that is the narcissistic personality disorder. The individual who has that low self-esteem, who believes, at least subconsciously, that their self-worth is bestowed by others, external locus of control, and as a result is very arrogant and haughty as a defense. Right? That becomes their crystallized personality trait. Right? Not necessarily what's going on here with Elaine. She doesn't really come off as arrogant or haughty, but she's clustering. Right. So we have splitting. And we have that reflection of that need to be reflected back, in as much as she has this new cohort that fails to. Right. Any other observations with Elaine?
Compared to her attachment style, because it seems not healthy. It doesn't seem like it would be, like a adaptive attachment. It seems like, I think she's kind of both like, I'm misusing a lot of terms right now, but she both like separates from people that she cares about and then clings to people that she cares about. And that kind of like combined type of attachment.
That Maher? Is that Margaret Maher?
No, I'm brain injured right now, but.
We have to look
Yeah,
that up in terms,
Attachment style?
yeah, it was Horny,
I think it is one.
is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm spitballing here.
Yeah.
It's totally guessing. But I think you're right. And I think both of these ideas actually do merge, right? Bowlby, okay.
Harry.
Yeah.
The good news is that if you gave me enough time, I definitely would have gotten that. The bad news is that if it was on a certifying multiple choice test, I'm not so sure.
And the word I'm looking for was disorganized. She has like a very disorganized attachment style instead of a secure.
So whether we actually come from the perspective of attachment and attachment theory, or from the Freudian sense of, or even Kohut with early childhood healthy narcissism, we're really getting back to very early childhood development, again, as early as perhaps age 2, right? So for those of you who have seen Seinfeld, what other information do we have that actually confirms this or supports this idea that Elaine may have been neglected at such a young age so as to develop these styles in terms of her attachment, in terms of her need to have what is good reflected back so that she believes it? No prior episodes. I mean, her father is very, very, very austere and strict, and is really devoid of really any emotion. And that could not have been healthy, especially when, and I'd have to look this up. And if I have time, when I have time, I will nerd out and look through all 9 seasons. I don't think there's a single mention of her mother ever, not even in a script, not even a reference to her mother. I know there's one where she's returning from St. Louis, having visited her sister. Her father's in at least 2 episodes.
What?
Yeah, it's one of the earlier episodes where she's returning from I think it's St. Louis. I might be making that up. But yeah, and that's the only reference to her sister that I'm aware of. But I don't think her mother's ever referenced in this. So with that absence of mom and with what we know about her dad, I mean, you could see where therapy might need to go back and work through. All right, 20 minutes after the hour, we got about 5 minutes left. Any other characters you want to discuss? I don't know if attachment theory is going to show up in a shelf exam. It might be fair game, but it's rare that I think you'll actually get theorists like that. Any of the characters come to your attention? The Bizarro Jerry.
I mean, we were kind of talking about Kramer.
Yeah, he had a good role in the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess like unpacking that, like he was trying to help someone with the printer and then like he didn't end up helping them and then ended up taking a job, but it wasn't a real job. I don't know what we want to make of that. I mean, I just thought that was interesting for the episode. I'm not sure.
Provide more detail when you say it wasn't a real job.
Yeah, so he just started showing up at the office, like he didn't like get hired, right? Yeah. Yeah, I haven't watched Seinfeld, so I don't know a lot about his character, but is this like typical of Kramer? Yeah.
I think if you actually polled 1,000 people, I don't know if a single one would say no to that question.
Yeah.
So and we again, parallel clinical medicine, when we hear from family, for example, oh, this is who they are. The first thing that should come to mind is what? Yeah, that what you're seeing is not a change from previous functioning, right? Meaning that it's probably not a mental disorder that's defined by episodes. So it's not likely bipolar. It's not likely a depressive disorder. What it is likely would be a personality disorder, this pervasive character trait or traits that define who they are, and then if and when they become maladaptive, perhaps a personality disorder, right? maladaptive, and resulting in clinically significant deficits in functioning, like vocational functioning, right? So that's who Kramer is, no doubt about that. And would you be surprised if any of his family members, upon providing collateral information, said that, yeah, I mean, he does, march to the beat of his own drum? Would you be surprised at all by that comment? No. So if that's the case, and if we're thinking personality disorders, what cluster do you think we might be focusing on when diagnosing or discussing Kramer?
Maybe.
Yeah, it's A. Yeah, it's A. Individuals who are odd and eccentric might actually be, when maladaptive, suffering from a cluster A personality disorder. Now, the schizoid personality is the individual who has maladaptive fantasy as a very characteristic defense mechanism. So this autistic retreat into this inner world to provide some protection from the outer world or the real world, without frank psychosis. So very withdrawn, emotionally detached, and living in a quote unquote fantasy world. Here, fantasy is really specific to the defense mechanism, right? So it's the same defense mechanism, and we'll do with Kramer exactly what we did with Elaine, going back to early childhood experiences. If we see a young Kramer, 3, 4, or 5, engaging in fantasy as a defense mechanism, what might we be observing? Give me an example. When do children utilize this defense? Dissociate? Yeah, right, which is completely normal, right? When developmentally appropriate, right? So when your 4-year-old tells you that their imaginary friend did X, Y, and Z, do not call me. Don't text me. It's completely normal, right? For Kramer, it's not. And there is an episode, and I always reference this. At some point, I probably should find the episode's title, where Kramer's talking about one of his friends. And Jerry stops him and says, these friends that you talk about, how come we never met them? We did, right? Yeah. I have to look it up, right? Again, I referenced that line so many times. Is Kramer, or does Kramer have imaginary friends outside the context of normal development, right? Because he's in his 30s here, at least, right? And he still has imaginary friends, right? So this might be schizoid personality disorder. Now, if in addition to this, there are odd and eccentric behaviors with this emotional detachment, maybe even schizotypal personality disorder, right? And then finally, the third and final cluster A personality is the paranoid personality, the individual with the cardinal trait of pervasive suspiciousness of others, right? Which on some episodes, Kramer absolutely does manifest. He does demonstrate. So again, does Kramer have multiple characteristics shared by all 3? Sure, that's why we call that a cluster. Does he actually meet the required number of criteria for any one? Probably. Okay. A little bit beyond the scope of our discussion this morning, but that's an ultra brief introduction to the cluster A personality disorders through Kramer. And again, we're probably looking back early childhood experiences and his struggling with fantasy play, and why that fantasy play went beyond 6, 7, or 8 years. And he still has imaginary friends. 25 minutes after the hour, any final thoughts, any final observations? The Bizarro Jerry. No, we're good. All right, we'll cut it here. For the interns on Zoom, we will log immediately back on for our morning rounds. See you then.